Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki. Our topic today is preparing forms for your NSF ATE proposal. This webinar is being recorded. You'll automatically receive a link to the recording, and please use the chat window on the upper right of your screen to forward your questions to our expert panelists today. It's my pleasure now to introduce our panelists. Let me begin with Elaine Kraft. Elaine is the principal investigator of Mentor Connect. Mentor Connect is an ATE project that focuses on leadership development and outreach for advanced technological education program at the National Science Foundation. Elaine, welcome today. Will you please welcome our audience and introduce your co-presenters?
Thanks, Mike. We're delighted to be with you today and with all of you in the audience. Thank you for being here. My co-presenters today are Ellen Haas and Emery DeWitt. Ellen is co-principal investigator for the Mentor Connect project, and Emery is the Mentor Connect project manager. Collectively, the Mentor Connect team has many years of experience completing the forms that we will be discussing with you today. Now, Mike, I'd like to check with our audience and see how many viewers we have sharing screens today. We know how many have registered, but often people get together to watch these webinars. So could you help me watch the chat box and see how many people we have?
I certainly will, Elaine. And so, colleagues, it helps us demonstrate impact to the National Science Foundation because, as Elaine mentioned, many of you do look at this together. So just put in the window. Lots of people coming in saying hello there, Elaine. There's a couple of twos, but most of us are solos. I remember one time we had our entire group watching from our event. Elaine, I'll ask you to do one thing. Our audio system is saying that your microphone is a little close. If you move it back slightly, there's a slight popping noise from your mic. So just push it back slightly, and I think that'll improve your audio quality. Thanks for doing that.
Okay, does that sound better?
Yes, let's go ahead and we'll take it from here. Thank you, colleagues, for putting the number of people that are watching with you. Elaine, I think we will record that for our records. Let's go ahead into the webinar.
Okay, thanks. Today's webinar is designed to guide you through the preparation of the forms associated with submission of an NSF grant proposal. While most of these forms are not unique to the NSF ATE program, some documents and instructions for how you should complete the forms are specific to ATE. Our goal is to help you prepare competitive grant proposals and avoid common mistakes as you prepare and submit your proposal. This is important because errors in submitting the required information as specified can result in having your proposal returned without review. The Mentor Connect team will provide guidance for completing the required forms, but please be reminded that we are not speaking on behalf of the National Science Foundation. The opinions we express are our own. We will share information from NSF publications as well as from our own experience. First, I would like to give you an overview of what we will be discussing today. We will be covering forms and related documents that are part of all NSF ATE proposals. You can see from this diagram that the heart of any proposal is the project description. Some people refer to this as the narrative, and we may use both terms during today's presentation. The project summary is what you might call an elevator speech for your project. It is a short, one-page overview of your project. Ellen will share some information about these two project components later in the webinar, but they aren't our emphasis for today. Also, there will be important forms that we will not discuss today, specifically budget forms and the budget justification. These particularly critical components of proposal preparation were covered in a separate webinar that we provided earlier this year. The Budget and Budget Justification webinar recording and a tutorial derived from the webinar are available on the Mentor Connect website. Emory will tell you more about how to access Mentor Connect resources later in this program. So, what are we discussing today? The cover sheet, project data form, biographical sketches, current and pending support forms, facilities and other resources form, references cited, data management plan, list of contributors, and the supplemental documents, which are somewhat like appendices to a proposal. Each item serves a specific purpose. We will walk you through each one to help you understand what is required. Our desire is to help you better understand these forms and how to avoid some of the errors frequently seen by program officers and reviewers. The bottom line is that careful preparation of forms contributes to a proposal that is more competitive overall. I thought an example might help you understand why forms are not a trivial part of your grant proposal. The numbers in this example are from a typical project proposal that was submitted to the NSF ATE program several years ago. The full proposal was 86 pages long. Of those 86 pages, the project description or narrative filled 15 pages, which is the maximum. The project summary is restricted to 1 page, so we had 1 page for that. Budget forms for a 3-year project will take up 4 pages, which is a budget for each year and then a cumulative budget for the entire project. The budget justification filled 3 pages in addition. So far, we've accounted for only 23 pages of the proposal. Forms and supplementary documents made up the remaining 63 pages, or 73% of the proposal used in this example. As you can see, the majority of the overall proposal is made up of forms and supplementary documents. This is no small amount of work, so get started on these forms right away. They take some time and need to be prepared thoughtfully. Mike, could you run a poll for us now? We're interested in knowing how many of our audience are currently Mentor Connect participants or perhaps former ones.
So, Lane, you can see that people are coming in right now. Let's give them a minute to respond, and then we'll see what we've got. Most of them, you can see, are coming in under other college personnel. So, folks, put in your answers. Let's give them, Elaine, 5 more seconds. I'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's our results, Elaine. Look at that. Almost 70% of the people that work to help generate these proposals. 75% now. Excellent.
That's good. Well, we certainly encourage teamwork on these proposals, and having other college personnel, particularly grant writers, involved is really key to getting a really competitive package put together. So I'm glad that all of you are out there today. Now, I want to turn the program over to Emory to get us started.
Good afternoon or good morning in some areas. I will begin with 2 resources that you should refer to over and over again in the Advanced Technological Education Program Solicitation and the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, known by the acronym of PAPPG. While the PAPPG covers everything you need to know to submit a proposal and manage a project at any division at the National Science Foundation, the ATE solicitation includes information that is critical to ensuring that you meet all of the requirements that are specific to the ATE program. Read the solicitation over and over again. A new solicitation was put in summer of 2017, and an update is anticipated in early summer 2018. Once available, we recommend that you print out and read the AT solicitation and have it handy while you prepare your proposal. This advice applies to faculty who will serve as principal investigators as well as to grant writers. solicitation documents are updated regularly. The ATE solicitation is usually published to cover 3 years, and the submission deadline for each year is specified. This year is unique in that an update to the solicitation will be published this summer to clarify funding opportunities for those seeking national ATE Center funding. There may be other changes as well. So even before you think about starting on forms in FastLane, you must meet as a team and think about the following. Decide on one person to handle input in FastLane. Principal investigator and authorized organizational representative, or AOR, should cross-check and sign off to completeness before submission. Register your institution with FastLane and get your FastLane ID. Note that your FastLane ID is the same ID you use to access research.gov. Who is your college's authorized organizational representative, or AOR? Decide who this is early, or have someone who can speak for the college named to assume this responsibility. You can upload information in FastLane, delete it, and upload different information until the proposal is finally submitted to NSF. So there is no reason not to start this process immediately. So since you have editing flexibility and there are so many forms to complete, you should get started with these forms sooner than later. I want to quickly draw your attention to the light bulb icon that you will see throughout the webinar. These are tips and tricks from the Mentor Connect team. These reminders will help you avoid errors and should make the process easier. Now, back to the PA-PPG, or Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, a document NSF publishes annually. Always make certain that you are referring to the most current PA-PPG. As you can see on the screen, there are a variety of ways to navigate through the document with HTML links available at nsf.gov. The PA-PPG includes a proposal preparation section with information that is critical, such as allowable font sizes, margins, and specific requirements for proposal components. The PA-PPG is also available on nsf.gov website in a PDF format. If you sign up online to receive publications from NSF, then you will begin receiving links to important NSF documents as new ones are published. The PA-PPG, for example, is updated once a year and typically sent out in November and December with a January active date. Okay, so now we're moving on to the forms in FastLane. So FastLane is the online system that works most efficiently for inputting proposal information. In another year or so, research.gov will become the primary input system for all grant proposal submissions. Note that your research.gov is an NSF website. Don't confuse this with grants.gov. There are many good reasons for using FastLane instead of grants.gov when submitting grant proposals to the NSF. Data and information entered into the online system will look quite different in a hard copy. We will use some screenshots to show you where to input information and how forms look once they're completed. You will be clicking the Go button to complete each form. We will go through each of the forms individually. Please note there are 2 supplementary docs entries that apply to most first-time proposals. You'll see the arrows. We will also be discussing a new requirement when we talk about the single copy document requirements. There are a few items that you will not need to worry about when completing forms, and they are the mentoring plan, deviation authorization, and suggested reviewers are not applicable to ATE proposals. Notice that you can view the latest updated saved information signified by date. NSF has implemented a new automated compliance check function. This will help ensure that proposal requirements are met prior to submission. Your proposal will not be accepted if required forms are not completed as specified. A 5-page document about the compliance check function is available on the nsf.gov website and also Mentor Connect resource library. Now we'll move on to the cover sheet. So here's some tips for completing the cover sheet. The cover sheet provides NSF with a concise summary of all of the administrative data about the proposal. Included is a requirement for college certification that all statements in the proposal are true and that they will follow the appropriate federal grant regulations. A question and checkbox completed by the AOR for the college constitutes an electronic signature on behalf of the institution. There is no actual or electronic signature to sign or be inserted. The AOR must get all the way to the bottom of the cover sheet section and end of the page to reach the authorization questions. Some do overlook that. Only the AOR has the permission granted by the college and set up in advance in FastLane to check off on the certification authorization in the online system. There is no grace period for doing this. If the certification isn't complete when the proposal is submitted prior to the deadline, the proposal will be returned without review. So here is a sample cover sheet. The majority of ATE proposals, including small grants for institutions new to ATE, will be submitted in the ATE projects track. In the For Consideration by NSF box, select Do ATE Projects, or DUE ATE Projects. Also, new to ATE or any other ATE project should be noted as research other than rapid or eager. If in doubt, call the Mentor Connect team, ask your mentor, or call an NSF program officer. Getting your proposal in the right category for review is very, very important. Projects take longer than you think they will. It is a good idea to request the maximum time allowed for the type of grant you're requesting, which is typically 36 months or 3 years. Note the duration of the grant you're requesting in months should be in whole year equivalents. For example, 24 months for 2 years, 36 months for 3 years. So, under proposed duration, you will likely place 36 months here for a 3-year project. The amount requested is an important component in helping make sure your proposal is sent to the appropriate panel. For example, small grants are $225,000 or less, so indicate this here. It's important to note that indirect costs must be included within the budget maximum for the type of proposal you are seeking. If you request more than $225,000 for your proposal, it will be placed in the larger, more competitive general pool of ATE project proposals for review. And this will reduce your chances of funding by as much as 40 to 50%. So please do remember this. Your proposal number, which is in the top left-hand screen up there on the example, becomes your grant number if the proposal is funded. Knowing your proposal grant number is very helpful at every stage. This is how you locate your proposal when you work in FastLane. This is also how you identify your proposal when communicating with program officers. We collect these proposal numbers from participants in each Mentor Connect cohort to help us track the status of proposal awards. Here's a quick note about start dates. NSF is most likely to set your start for the project on the date you have selected. Consider what will work with your business office and work plan. Most proposals have start dates between June 1 and September 1. Consider the time it will take to get faculty release time worked out and when you want it to start. For example, if you receive your award notification in May and you selected a start date of September 1st, you'll have the whole summer to get all of this worked out. Choosing a mid-semester start date will make it difficult or impossible to get people started working with grant support. Don't choose a date that is too early in the calendar year. This could result in receipt of your award notice on or after your requested start day, which puts you behind from day one. Don't expect to be able to change the start date once it is set by NSF in your award. On the screen, you will notice there are several check boxes or X's. As you submit to the ATE track, the example here shows the appropriate selections. First-time principal investigators should indicate this by selecting Beginner Investigator. You don't insert information directly into the cover sheet. You submit information elsewhere, and FastLane populates the cover sheet. The place to provide information for the cover sheet isn't always obvious, so be diligent about locating the data entry point. If this is not done carefully, you could end up with the PI or co-PI names on the cover sheet with no associated email addresses, phone numbers, or any other information that is important to include. To reviewer, this looks sloppy. Do this work diligently. And always front pages to ensure that they look the way you intended before submission. This is what the cover sheet or certification page looks like when it's printed. As you can see, it's quite different than the information looked when inserted in various places in the FastLane forms. Okay, here are some cover sheet takeaways. There are tips and tricks for the cover sheet. It is important to remember that the cover sheet is where you will enter the title of your project. Don't use the NSF name or acronym in a project title, and strive for something descriptive, innovative, and meaningful. For example, teaching and learning innovations to improve success rates in manufacturing programs, or bridge to nanotechnology. Don't try to be cute or demeaning. For example, calling a faculty development project turning bad technician educators
but first of all, I have to tell you I'm going to change
names
the
that
topic,
result in useful acronyms,
or rather the title of my next proposal, turning bad technician educators into good ones. That was great. I've got to remember that one. Thank you. I'm teasing about that. You know, there's been several questions, and it's those important ones. For example, we talk about these new grants to ATE as 225, a cap of 225,000. And yes, as you see in the chat, Emery, right, that's the total, not the per year, but that is the total, right? Yes, so thanks. Elaine, I've got a question for you. I'm going to have you come back on, Elaine, and then that'll help us recheck your audio system. Here's a question for you. You mentioned the start date. What if here's a question. My college demanded that I require a start date on July 1 to coincide with the college's fiscal year. That makes sense, doesn't it? Is there any reason not to do that?
The only reason not to do that, Mike, would be if you have some work that's got to be done to get ready for fall semester, and that simply wouldn't give you enough time to be prepared to roll something out with fall classes, which in many cases begin in August, which if you were funded the 1st of July and you actually wanted to have some work done and something started at the beginning of fall semester, that might push you and you might benefit from having a June 1 start date. As a general rule, I encourage people to not choose a date before April 1st, and they won't fund anything after September the 1st because it has to coincide with the federal fiscal year as well. So the window is sort of April 1 to September 1, and July 1 and June 1 are probably the most frequent start dates that I see on proposals.
Well, good. Thank you, Elaine. Our audio system says that your audio quality is better. It's still, our IT support says that if you could move your microphone just a little further away, it may eliminate some of the popping. But thank you, Elaine. It does sound better. Here's your second question. It'll be the final one for this question break. One of our colleagues says, could you remind us again of the tracks with their brief definitions that are applicable here, the program tracks?
The program tracks in ATE are currently projects, centers, and research. It's a little confusing because particularly within the ATE projects category, there are a lot of funding, separate funding opportunities within that one big track. When you're submitting the proposal, you just indicate ATE project, but you might be going for the small new to ATE. You might be going for an adapt and implementation project, maybe an instrumentation project, faculty development. There are any number of funding opportunities that are explained in the solicitation, but when you submit the proposal, they all fit into very few buckets at this point in time.
Well, thanks, Elaine, for that. I know we'll have another question break going forward. Let's turn now to Ellen Howes. Before we do, please, folks, continue putting your questions into the chat window. And Ellen, why don't you take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. We'll start with your project summary. So this is essentially your one-pager. It's a summary of the project that includes an overview and, most importantly, a statement on the intellectual merit and a statement on the broader impacts of your proposed activities. So your proposal will not be accepted if this is submitted without a project summary or if the project summary does not, again, address both of these criteria, intellectual merit and broader impact. And you're going to hear those terms throughout this presentation. So this is actually the form to input your project summary. FastLane prompts you to input information to 3 separate text boxes: your overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. You're required to submit information into all 3 text boxes, and your project summary in total should be no more than 1 page, and the total number of characters that will be accepted, totaling all 3 text boxes, is 4,600 characters. So if you prepare your project summary in Word, you can then cut and paste the appropriate pieces into the text boxes. But you do want to note sometimes there can be difficulty with character counts, with cutting and pasting. So if you get repeated errors, you may have to resort to physically typing the text directly into the text boxes. And if you are able to successfully cut and paste, you do want to proofread because sometimes characters can change. Possessives, for example, can sometimes turn into question marks. So you're going to want to double check and correct any potential errors in conversion. So you will need to work within these text boxes. NSF will only accept the project summary as an uploaded separate document if it contains special characters or mathematical symbols or Greek letters. Note that it's really not typical for AT project summaries to have special characters. So again, you would be writing your project summary and then either cutting and pasting or inputting it into these text boxes. Okay, so let's break down the project summary a little further into what these parts actually entail. For the overview, this would be a description of the activity that would result in the proposal, where it be funded, and a statement of the objectives and methods that you're using. You should clearly indicate in the first few sentences the disciplinary focus of the project, the kinds of activities proposed, whether it be curriculum adaptation, professional development for educators, as an example, and then the primary audience for those activities. It's important you get these in the first couple sentences because NSF uses this information to assign the proposal to a panel for review. So you'll need to get right to the point of your grant, explain your proposal's objectives, and what you'll do to achieve those objectives. And as a general rule, you do not want to use this space for building a rationale for your project, describing your college or your community environment, or stating the amount of money that you're requesting. This is really intended to be a concise overview. You want to consider it your elevator speech, and if this is all someone reads about your project, they should be able to understand what you're trying to do and your desired outcomes. So when addressing the intellectual merit and the broader impact statements, you want to be sure you understand what NSF means by those terms and study the criteria provided in the RFP. You do not have to address all of the criteria listed by NSF in the ATE program, but you should plan to align with at least some of what has been provided to prospective grantees. So the statement on intellectual merit should describe the potential of the proposed activities to advance knowledge. The statement on broader impact should describe the potential of the proposed activities to benefit society. And again, the request for proposals refines this criteria further and has a specific section on merit review principles and criteria. And examples of questions that you can address in your proposal, again, taken straight from the RFP, around intellectual merit. Does the project have the potential for improving student learning in science or engineering technician education programs? Are the goals, objectives, and outcomes, and the plans and procedures for achieving them worthwhile, well-developed, and realistic? Under broader impacts, you could address, has an assessment of workforce needs for technicians been conducted? Does the project work with employers to address their current and future needs for technicians? Does the project promote diversity in the technical workforce? So again, NSF prescribes some of these questions for you to help you flesh out these statements, and you want to be sure to pay close attention to that when drafting them. So we move from your elevator speech to your project description. This is the heart of your proposal, and this is where you should include a clear statement of the work and the activities you're undertaking. So it should address what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you plan to do it, how you'll know if you are successful, and what benefits and impacts will result from a successful project. So this means including information on the project's motivating rationale, your goals, objectives, deliverables, activities, a timeline, management plan, the roles and responsibilities of the PIs, co-PIs, and other senior personnel, a plan for sustainability after the period of NSF funding ends, a dissemination plan, and an evaluation plan, all in 15 pages. And again, you're going to want to pay close attention to addressing intellectual merit and broader impacts review criteria, as I talked about earlier, as your project description also must include a separate section in the narrative labeled broader impacts and one labeled intellectual merit, where you can address that criteria in the project description. So on the screen here is the actual form in FastLane for project descriptions. You're basically going to upload your project description either as a PDF document or a variety of word processing files. FastLane will convert it to a PDF. You will want to double check your upload once it is in FastLane to make sure there were no issues in conversion. And as some tips in preparing your project description, these may seem like no-brainers, but they're actually crucial to the success of your proposal. You'll want to pay attention to font size, layout, and the size of your document. Again, the length of the project description must fit into 15 pages with 1-inch margins on all sides. So once uploaded, it's really a good idea to check that you do not exceed that amount. And you also want to look at font. While the PA-PPG allows for a minimum font of 10-point in specific fonts such as Arial or Courier, Mentor Connect recommends that you use an 11 or 12-point standard font to ensure readability. And if you use Times New Roman, the PA-PPG actually requires you to use an 11-point font. You'll want to use section headings, bullets, or charts to ensure a clear proposal and readability. And again, if you use any visuals in your project description, it still is that they have to be included in that 15-page limitation. And you do want to keep in mind that reviewers may be reading up to 12 proposals. Yours may be the last one they're reading late at night, and it will be difficult for them to read and could impact how they view your proposal if you have a minimum font size and a poor layout. So you do want to consider these things when putting your proposal together. As another point on formatting, do not use automated endnotes. You can number your references and then list them in a separate reference section, and the references would not count towards that 15-page limitation, and that will be covered a little later in the webinar. And another note, the project description should be self-contained, and you shouldn't point to URLs or ask reviewers to leave the description to view an external site. Reviewers are under no obligation to view those sites. The information on those sites are actually considered to circumvent your page limitations, and the sites could be altered or gone between submission and review. So you really want to encapsulate everything you're going to do in these 15 pages. You want to make sure you follow grant guidelines for what the project description should address, and the project description must begin with results from prior NSF support if applicable. So as the majority of you are new to NSF funding, this would not be applicable, but if any PI or co-PI identified on the project has received NSF funding, or according to the ATE program solicitation, funding from other sources such as Department of Labor, and those awards pertain to the scope of work that you're proposing to NSF in this new proposal, you'll need to include information on them and results of prior support, including specific outcomes and results, and demonstrate the impact of those activities. If you have no prior support, you would still need to list that you have no prior results to share. You could list here that you have no prior support, but that you are and have gone through Mentor Connect. But again, this would just be, very simple, 2 sentences, but you do have to include a section on results of prior support, even if you do not have any to share. All right, from here, I'm going to move to bio sketches. So bio sketches are required for each individual on a proposal that you identify as senior personnel, so including your PIs and your co-PIs. And you'll upload bio sketches for each of these individuals as a single PDF, and you would upload them in other supplementary documents. So NSF requires a very specific format for bio sketches. So again, you'll want to consult the Bible, the PAPPG. The bio sketches must not exceed 2 pages. And it's a good idea to create a template for those bio sketches if you're asking senior personnel to complete them so they can put in their information in the required format. And Mentor Connect also has examples of bio sketches in its resources collection if you need to view those as well. You'll want to complete these as soon as possible. This is something that can be completed today and uploaded into Fastlane, and then you have that done and you can work on other parts of your proposal. So some of the components of the bio sketch, you do not want to include any personal contact information, but you would list professional preparation, any undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral institutions, the location of the institution, majors, degree, and year. Under appointments, you would list in reverse chronological order all of the individual's academic and professional appointments, beginning with current employment. Products or publications, this would be a list of up to 5 products that most closely relate to the proposed project that are citable, such as publications, data sets, or software. And this list must include full citation information. If your product section only includes publications, you can change the heading from products to publications. And if you do not have products or publications, that's okay, as this BioSketch format has been created to also serve the needs of the research community applying for NSF funding. So if you don't have anything to list under products, that's fine. For synergistic activities, a list of up to 5 activities that demonstrate the broader impact of the individual's professional and or scholarly activities as it relates to the program activities being suggested by the proposal. So this is the place where you would demonstrate skills and assets that the individual holds. So some examples of things to include in this category might be innovations in teaching and training, development of curriculum materials, broadening the participation of groups underrepresented in STEM. If you've worked as a subrecipient of an ATE Centers grant, or you're working with other ATE projects as a primary partner, or if you have a membership or participation in a professional society that relates to the scope of work that you're proposing, such as the Council on Undergraduate Research. or if you've served in advisory roles on ATE-related work or projects. And so from here, I will actually be turning it back to Elaine to talk about current and pending support.
Thank you, Ellen. Current and pending support forms are required. NSF wants personnel working on grants to have dedicated time to do this work. Current and pending support forms show NSF how much of your time is committed or will be committed to funded projects. This reporting includes projects supported by all funding sources and not just NSF. The expectation is that a person working on a grant either be paid directly by the grant for the portion of his or her time that is dedicated to grant work, or that the person be released from a portion of his or her workload or teaching load to do grant work. When release time is used, grant funds may be used to pay replacement faculty or other personnel. So, for example, you want to provide a faculty member with some release time, then you would hire an adjunct faculty perhaps to teach a course that they would have ordinarily taught. Well, the adjunct could be paid with this money. When release time is used, grant funds can be a combination of payment methods. For example, a faculty member may receive release time during the academic year, but be paid directly to work on the grant in the summer, or when he or she may not normally be under contract to the college. Anyone serving in a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel role must have a current and pending support form included in the proposal. This includes anyone working on the grant in one of these roles who is paid by your college, even if the person is not an employee of the college. How the person is paid, as an employee or as a consultant, is not important. The person's leadership role in the grant triggers the requirement for current and pending support forms. It is important to know what NSF means by current and pending. Current refers to grants already awarded, not the one you're currently preparing. The one you're currently preparing would be pending, even though you haven't submitted it yet. A pending proposal is one that either hasn't been submitted or a proposal that has been submitted but for which a funding decision is not yet known. The proposal that you have in progress now for October submission is a pending grant for preparing a current and pending support form. Now, let's talk about how many of these current and pending support forms you will need to prepare. For each person, there must be a current and pending support form for each proposed or ongoing project for which the person has a time commitment, including the proposal you're preparing. This means that every person included in your proposal as a PI, principal investigator, co-PI, or senior personnel role will have at least one current and pending support form, even if this is your first NSF ATE proposal. The Proposal and Award Policies and Procedure Guide, the PAPPG, tells us that current and pending support forms must include all current project support from whatever source. They cite federal, state, local, and foreign government agencies, public or private foundations, industrial or other commercial organizations as potential entities that you could be receiving support from. Please note that the PAPPG also states that the proposed project and all other projects or activities requiring a portion of the time of the PI and other senior personnel must be included, even if the person will receive no salary support from the project. If this is your first grant, you may only have one current and pending support form for each person serving in a principal investigator or senior personnel role. However, check to make sure that these individuals are not working on other funded projects, such as a Department of Labor grant, state-funded grants, or foundation-funded grants that will need to be reported. Now, let's talk about the information you will need to supply on the current and pending support forms. There is a template in FastLane for preparing current and pending support forms. This is what the template looks like. The process goes more quickly if you collect all of the information you will need prior to completing the form. I will walk you through each line for which you will be supplying information. Also, check and double-check prior to proposal submission to make sure that the information you submit in the current and pending support form is consistent with the information that you provide elsewhere in the proposal. The budget, for example, is one place where you will indicate a time commitment of personnel. NSF staff will check to make sure that the time commitment is consistent and done correctly. You will need to supply the following information for each project and person for whom a form is completed. The project proposal title, the source of the support, project location, total award amount, your starting date, the ending date, and some of these are proposed. So if you've submitted a proposal, you have an active grant from somewhere else, and it's supposed to end in December of 2019, let's say, then that's the date you put. If something changes, say you get a no-cost extension on one of those projects, don't worry about that. Just put the date that the grant is supposed to end per the award that you received. List the support type, and that's where you indicate whether it is current or pending, and then the person months per year that are committed to the project. Now, this tricky little piece here is where the majority of the mistakes get made, so I'll be providing you with a couple of examples to kind of reinforce some points on that one. The way NSF requires that you report a person's time commitment to a project is in person months per year. As you will see in the note at the bottom of this page, you are not being asked the time span for grant work, but rather how much of a person's time within the time span a person will work on the project. This time commitment will need to be translated into person months. Person months must also be reported with only one decimal place, so you may need to round off your calculated numbers when reporting. There are 3 options organized into 2 categories for reporting time. Person months are to be reported in one category or the other, never both. The first category is calendar, and that's where you see the red up arrow there. This category typically is used for 12-month staff who work on a project. They typically work year-round. Person months reported in this category are most often associated with salaried personnel who work a percentage of time, such as 10% or 30%, throughout the 12-month calendar year on this project. And then they would work 90% or 70% of their time on some other job at the college or on some other project. The second category includes academic and summer. This category should be used for faculty. Faculty typically work on academic year contracts. Some faculty also work during the summer on a summer contract. The academic and summer boxes are provided to report this time in person months. To determine person months for faculty requires some calculation, unless the person is being supported 100% by a grant, which is rare. Since this reporting of person months on current and pending support forms and on budget forms is very often done incorrectly, let's go through a couple of examples. In the first example, we have a 12-month employee who dedicates 10% of his or her time to grant work. The number you should put in the current and pending support form is 1.2 calendar months, which is 10% of 12 months. You report time in months using only one decimal place. If you have made an entry in the calendar box, leave the other 2 boxes blank. Fight the urge to put a number in all 3 boxes. Next, let's consider a faculty member who is working on an academic contract. Typically, these contracts are for 9 months, but may vary by institution. This is where your math skills will be needed because all time must be listed in these person-month calculations. And so some translation will probably be required. For example, if a faculty member typically teaches 5 courses per semester, and this person will be provided with 1 course release time to work on the grant, both fall and spring semesters, that is considered 1/5 of the person's workload, or 20% release time, academic, referring to the academic year. Calculate 20% of the months covered by the academic year contract and report that in the academic box on the form. In this example, I assumed a 9-month contract, a full-time teaching load of 5 classes, and 1 course release time per semester to be provided by the grant. This will be 1.8 person months for the 9-month academic year, with year in quotes because it's a 9-month academic year. It's not actually a calendar year. If the release time for this person is just for 1 semester, then you would report half as much time in months. 1 course release time for 1 semester is 0.9 person months, so you would enter 0.9 in the academic box on the form. Now let's consider a situation where the teacher who had 1 course release time for both fall and spring semesters will also work on the grant in the summer. Again, you must determine the time that the person will work on the grant in terms of months and report it in the summer box option. For example, the summertime commitment will be 2 weeks or a half a month, which will be reported as 0.5 person months. So you enter the 0.5 in the summer box on the form. If a faculty member is scheduled to work on the project only in the summer, then you put the person months in the summer box and leave the academic box empty. With faculty, therefore, it is possible to have time reported for both academic and summer options. So you can do either or both. But with using those 2 options, the academic and summer, then you leave the calendar box empty. So you shouldn't ever put something in all 3 boxes. That's the big message here. You use one or the other, but not both. Once you've completed all of your current and pending support forms, then FastLane produces a form that looks like this example. In this case, for MentorConnect co-principal investigator, or co-PI, Dennis Faber, he was currently working on the first MentorConnect grant when the proposal for the second MentorConnect grant was submitted. Therefore, he has 1 entry for pending support and 1 for current support. An individual working on multiple projects will end up with a form with several entries like this. Again, NSF will be looking to see what the total time commitment is for an individual across all projects. So just to recap, one of the most frequent errors seen on current and pending support forms is mixing calendar year months with academic and/or summer months. So just don't do that. It is important to note that although the PAPPG mentions limiting faculty time to 2 summer months, this limitation does not apply to ATE grants, as long as the time requested is considered reasonable for the scope of work described. Always keep in mind that personnel time on grants needs to be reasonable and aligned with the work that the person will be doing. Reviewers expect to see key personnel included in the budget with compensation for time they devote to grant work. Beware having personnel donate time to grant-funded projects. Reviewers will be very skeptical and may doubt that the scope of work will be completed if the proposal does not include grant-supported personnel who have specific responsibilities for completing the scope of work. Reviewers will be looking for faculty time and budget to support that time. Also, donated time may be considered voluntary committed cost sharing, which is prohibited. One note about faculty overloads that are so common in community college environments. NSF will allow faculty overload pay for those working on grants as long as the workload is consistent with college policy and the policy applies to all faculty, not just those working on a grant. This is a change from previous years. If it is anticipated that faculty who will be working on the grant will be receiving overload pay, either to work on the grant or to teach courses, the budget and budget justification for your proposal will need to provide specifics, and the college policy should be referenced in the budget justification. Now, Emery's going to tell you about some more important forms.
Thank you, Elaine. Another form to be filled out is the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources form. This form provides an opportunity to explain the infrastructure, laboratories, equipment at your institution, and perhaps at partner locations that will be available for use to support the success of the project. You may also mention personnel, including unpaid advisors, as part of other resources. With this form, you should focus on equipment, infrastructure, and personnel that will or might be important to your project. If you have personnel who will devote time to making the project successful, but who will not be included in the budget, this is a good place to include this information. Keep in mind that you shouldn't use this space to describe all of the capabilities of your college. Too much information that isn't considered relevant to the specific project can be distracting to the reviewers. NSF's instructions state that in order for NSF and its reviewers to assess the scope of a proposed project, all organizational resources necessary for and available to a project must be described in the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources section of the proposal. The NSF Grant Proposal Guide states that proposals should include an aggregated description of the internal and external resources, both physical and the personnel, that the organization and its collaborators will provide to the project, should it be funded. Such information must be provided in this section, in lieu of other parts of the proposal, such as your budget justification or project description. The description should be narrative in nature and must not include any quantifiable financial information. Note that the instructions specifically tell you to not assign monetary value to the items listed and described on this form. So now to the form itself. The form offers the following categories for submitting information: laboratory, clinical, animal, computer, office, other, and major equipment. For ATE grants, the clinical and animal categories are typically not applicable, and you may indicate this on the form as it has been done in the example on the screen. The laboratory support is often quite important for the successful implementation of an ATE grant. If this is the case for your project, you will want to describe your current capability, even if the proposal includes some improvements or equipment additions. The computer capability can also be essential for your grant, especially if the project focuses on information technology, cybersecurity, and any number of other advanced technologies that are computer dependent and will make use of the computing capability and computer labs at your institution. The office support is also important to describe, since budget guidelines specifically state that grant budgets may not include office furnishing or everyday office equipment such as computers, copiers, and items that support normal office operations. The personnel implementing the grant, however, will definitely need office support to do so. If your institution is providing dedicated office space, access to your administrative support, or similar, this is a good place to make a statement about the support. Other is the section where you can describe resources other than facilities and equipment, such as personnel support. For example, this is a place where you can describe the talents you have assembled to serve as an internal advisory committee. Or perhaps you have a college recruiter lined up who will support the outreach activities of the grant, but who will not receive compensation from the grant for doing so. A third example of personnel you may want to describe in this section could be institutional research personnel who will help with internal evaluation and data collection. In other words, if someone will be working to support the project without compensation, this is the place to describe that donated time. but don't assign monetary value to the donated time or state a specific time commitment. Okay, now there's major equipment. It can be an important category for some ATE grants. Advanced technology programs are very often equipment intensive. Your institution may have major equipment that will be used in implementing the grant. Or you may have a partner university or industry working with the project and providing major equipment for your students. Perhaps you have a university or an industry partner with an electron microscope or clean room that will be used for teaching your students. If major equipment like this is involved in the success of your project, this is the place where you can describe the availability of these resources being provided by an industry or educational partner. I think you can see that these facilities, equipment, and other resources forms gives you an opportunity to share information that you can't fully describe anywhere else in your proposal. The final set of the materials for your proposal, known as supplementary documents, this is where you can include additional information to support your proposal, but carefully follow guidelines for appropriate documents to include. Program solicitations can be very specific in this regard. All right, NSF expects you to do some research in the process of developing a grant proposal. Like most funding sources, they encourage you the use of research-based strategies and adaptations and implementations from previously funded NSF ATE or other funded projects. Your references indicate that you have investigated what others have done that worked. You will want to cite references that explain outcomes that led you to select a particular strategy, curriculum, teaching methodology, or other promising or proven approach to address your challenges in technician education. Reference citations are also used to cite the sources of the data that you provided in describing your project rationale or results of prior support. As you include information from your research, here's one tip to keep in mind. You will want to manually number your references throughout the project description and then prepare a separate document with citations that correspond to those numbers. This separate document will then be uploaded into Fastlane. References are a separate section of the proposal and do not count towards your 15-page project description. I suggested that you manually number your references as you work because if you use automated endnotes, your citations will be automatically included in your 15-page project description, and this is not where they belong. All right, including in a data management plan is a requirement for ATE proposals. You must prepare a supplementary document of no more than 2 pages labeled Data Management Plan. This supplement should describe how the proposal will conform to NSF policy on the dissemination and sharing of research results. In essence, NSF expects you to share the outcomes of your work, and timely publication of results is encouraged. However, there are considerations of privacy, confidentiality, intellectual property, or other rights. The data management plan provides an opportunity for you to describe the care that will be taken in this regard. Your data management plan should specify the types of data and other materials and products that will be generated or collected by the project, how data will be stored, protected, and appropriately shared, how what is generated by the project will be preserved during and beyond the project, and how others will be able to access these project products. The data management plan will be reviewed as an integral part of the proposal. Here is a sample data management plan. This management plan was prepared for a small grant for institutions new to ATE. I encourage you to visit the link on the screen for additional guidance on how to develop your data management plan. As daunting as the instructions for producing data management plans sound, the plan need not be more than a page, especially for smaller projects. I will now turn it over to Elaine to talk about other supplementary documents for your proposal. Ellen, I'm sorry, not Elaine, Ellen.
Thanks, Emery. I'd like to go over supplemental materials and note that the only required supplemental documents are a data management plan, which Emery just covered, and it has its own section for submission into FastLane. And then you also need to include a list of all known people, aside from your participants and students, who will receive compensation from the project and their affiliation, and it would be uploaded under other supplementary documents. So again, you'll provide a list of all the people receiving compensation from the project, aside from the participants and their affiliations. And note that some of these people may not be from your college. So this is an area to really look for consistency. The list needs to be consistent with the budget and the budget justification in your project description and in your current and pending support forms. So in other words, if you don't want someone listed in this supplemental document whose function hasn't been addressed in the project description or in the budget. And also recommended but not required are letters of commitment. It's a good idea to obtain a few well-chosen letters of commitment for your proposal, but the key word here is commitment. Reviewers want to see documentation of the commitments described in the proposal, such as a letter from an industry partner pledging specific resources or time to the project. Letters of commitment should outline specific collaborations, partnerships, or resources pledged, and not merely be letters of support or endorsement. If you include letters of endorsement or support that are non-specific, your proposal can be reviewed without return. Can be returned without review. And you'll also want to beware of boilerplate and templates for letters. So if you supply your partners with boilerplate, they will use it, and it doesn't look so great when you have 5 identical letters of commitment. Also listed under supplemental documents, if your proposal solicitation asks that you include a bio-sketch of your external evaluator, if that person was named in the project description. So if you name your evaluator in the project description, they're also going to want to see a bio-sketch for your evaluator included as a supplemental doc. And there's a correction to this slide. You would not include a list of resources or an agenda for major activities as part of supplemental documents. There's been some changes there. They really want you to keep your proposal to 15 pages and not consider supplemental documents to be an appendix. And also I want to talk about, oops, this needs to move forward. Single copy documents. So another thing that is required by NSF, and this is also updated, I just posted into chat a link for an FAQ on NSF's site that specifically addresses collaborator and other affiliations, other affiliates. So for each person listed as a senior personnel on your project, so your co-PIs, your PI, would need to fill out this template. And it really provides a list of the people who you're collaborating with and your affiliations. And NSF uses this list primarily when they're putting together a review team for your proposal, just to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest. It used to be you supplied a list in alpha order. Now there is a specific template. You would go to the URL, you would download it. It's a little tricky. It's brand new. They require you to save it as an Excel document and then upload it into FastLane where it will convert to PDF. So it is rather simple in the sense that it's listing the name of your senior personnel and then again listing their collaborators and any known affiliates. So again, they can put together a review team without pulling in any of those individuals. But it is a little bit of a different thing where it used to be uploaded as a document you created. Now it's a specific template you download from NSF's site, upload as an Excel format, and it converts to PDF. And they've actually simplified it a little bit where they don't require as much information, but there is a clear FAQ on that. So when we send this out, we'll have updated this slide following the webinar with that URL, so it's most up to date for you. And if there are no collaborators, you would just indicate that and still upload that template so you've completed this portion of the proposal. Some general advice, start early, review what you've written several times, have someone else read it, take the time to plan out your proposal and again, build in time for review. And don't be afraid to ask questions. of your mentors, of the Mentor Connect team. When we do distribute information about this webinar, we will include everything that's been in chat as well, so some of those questions are addressed. And I think we have an abundance of questions, and Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Ellen. I'll turn to you first on this one. It has to do with these biosketches. It's sort of confusing, isn't it? Because there are two areas. One is in the beginning where you've got like a co-PI and you're uploading a biosketch into a certain area of the forms. And the other is where you're uploading biosketches into supplementary documents. Do you mind clarifying for us about those two instances?
Sure. Biosketches are required for any senior personnel. So the folks that you are budgeting under senior personnel, your PIs, your co-PIs, you're required to upload that biosketch for those individuals. Your grant evaluator, if that person is named in the project description, you may have your grant evaluator budgeted as a consultant or in a subaward. But if they are named, according to the ATE program solicitation, they would like to see a biosketch for that evaluator uploaded, and it would be uploaded under supplementary documents.
All within that 15-page limit, of course.
No, supplementary documents are not part of the 15-page limit of the project description. So that list of, the list of people that are getting compensated from the grant, your letters of commitment, your data management plan, those do not count against the 15 pages of your project description. These are separate pieces of the proposal.
Oh, good. And that leads us right to our next question about, that additional compensation. You mentioned, the participants. Who else might fall in there? Would the evaluator go in there under additional compensation, that list?
Yes, anyone that you are paying is receiving compensation from the grant. So your evaluator would go there. If you are working with a writer or a consultant to develop curriculum, that person would be listed there. So anyone that is working on the grant and being compensated for that work, that again is not considered a participant. If you're giving someone a stipend to come to a workshop or a travel stipend, that would not be included here. It's the folks, not your participants, but the folks that are actually being compensated for a scope of work in your proposal.
Okay. Good. One more question, and it's a pretty straightforward one. Can I use color in my submission? I want to make my graphics come alive. Can I use color?
There are mixed things on that. I'm always nervous if somebody is printing something out. If you're using color, that it may not print or be viewable. But there are some people who do use color. I would recommend black and white, just so there are no conversion issues. And there's no issues when printing or viewing proposals, but Elaine may have different thoughts on that.
Elaine, what do you think on that
well,
color
Ellen,
question?
you're right. Particularly if a reviewer receives their proposals from NSF, and NSF sends them out to reviewers in advance of the panel reviews, and when they print and send them out, they print and send them out in black and white. They may, the proposal may show up beautifully on the screen, but be sure you print it out in black and white and see how it's going to translate. I've seen people use shading that made the print where you could not read it when it was printed out in black and white. There's just risk there, as you indicated, and so like everything about the proposal, you need to print it out and see how it looks, both in color and in black and white, before you submit it. You can detect a lot of issues and correct them if you'll do that.
Excellent. Quick question.
There's no rule against color.
Right. Quick question back. I'll come back to you in just a moment. Ellen, here's a quickie. Is there a format, in that citation form, a reference form rather, you put those in? Is there a standard format required?
There's not a standard format. The PAPPG just says that you want to follow accepted scholarly practices. So if you follow APA or Chicago Manual style, whichever I think is your preference, as long as it's an accepted scholarly practice for citation, they're not requiring a specific format one over another.
That makes sense. Thank you. Elaine, back to you and colleagues. We're almost done today. Thank you for all your patience. This is such a interesting and complicated series of rules and regulations and forms and formats. But here's one for you, Elaine. You know, on that cover page, there's these check boxes, and one of our participants saw that one of them says SBIR and some other things. You know, they were curious. You know, do they check those? They're not quite sure what to do about those early on check boxes.
I think you're referring to choosing the type of funding you're requesting, and it is research other than rapid or eager of the choices that they're giving us right now. Hopefully they'll make it clearer for us someday, but what's a little hard for us to understand in the ATE program, and those of us, any actually project in the Division of Undergraduate Education, these are education projects, and so sometimes we don't really think of them as research, but NSF really considers every project they fund research of some type. Maybe it's applied research, but so it would be research other than rapid or eager. Eager, I think that's what.
That makes sense. Here's a question that I'll ask to both of you, both Ellen and Elaine, but I'll start with Ellen. Ellen, this is an amazingly complicated topic, and I know there's got to be more resources out there. For example, is there a FastLane help desk if I'm struggling with FastLane? And I believe that Mentor Connect has a help desk as well, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. FastLane does have a help desk. You can call, you can email, and they're actually, if you call, they're really responsive, so they can help you with FastLane issues. And then yes, you could also get in contact with your mentor with Mentor Connect if there are pieces you're confused about. If you're having actual access issues or password issues or something like that, you'll if that's technical, you'll want to go through the FastLane help desk. But again, they're very responsive and very helpful.
Good. And Ellen, Elaine, what other resources might we be able to access from Mentor Connect besides that help desk? I think there was a budget webinar recently, wasn't there?
Right. And the webinar recordings, the PowerPoints, are available for all the webinars that we do. In addition, for the budget and budget justification webinar, as well as for this tutorial, for this forms webinar, we provide a tutorial. Now, the neat thing about a tutorial is that we take the PowerPoints from the webinar and we take the content that was verbally shared during the webinar and we put the content with the PowerPoint slide in a tutorial. That way, let's say you need some help with current and pending support forms, but maybe you don't need to listen to the entire webinar over every form again. You will be able to go in the tutorial to just the current and pending support forms and be refreshed on what those examples look like and what we said about those at the time. It might be data management plans or whichever form you're working on. It allows just-in-time help. You can go right to the one that you want. And those are all accessible by way of the Mentor Connect website and our resource library. And we get them out pretty quickly after webinars. We could have the form out in 10 days to a week or 10 days or so. And if you have any problems locating it, you can always call the Mentor Connect help desk, and we will make sure you're connected with these additional resources.
That's a great offer. I think the tutorial would even be better than a transcript, right? Because you've got both together so you can see how it works. So, Ellen, thank you for putting that comment in the transcript, too. I think we could easily send that out to the registrants of this webinar. They'll get the recorded link in a couple of days, but when that tutorial's available, we should send it out to this list, too. That makes a lot of sense. We'll do that. Thank you, Ellen. I'd like to think about as we close this webinar to remind ourselves of several things. Number one, we've got some time, right? So this is currently May, and with the October submission coming up, but it is a good time. And Elaine, I think, if I'm right, you can go into FastLane, you can open up these things and try them. You look them around. You can go in there and see if you can make them work before it's not like you're...
Absolutely, and anything you put in FastLane and save will just be sitting there, and you can go back in and you can decide you want it to be different. You can take it out, put it back in, you can make corrections. it really is, there's really no reason not to go ahead and do some of these things because nothing's permanent until you upload to NSF.
Interesting. Let me collect now. Am I turning to Emory at this point to review our project resources?
Yes, Mike. I think Ellen and Elaine probably covered a lot of this with the Mentor Connect project. It offers a resource library that provides the solutions to most of your grant proposal writing needs for the ATE program. As you can see on the screen, it has the visit thementorconnect.org, and you'll go to resources. There's frequently asked questions. There's templates. There's samples of all the forms and procedures that you would need to do with your proposal. Also, you can find there is information on teachingtechnicians.org website and resources to guide project evaluation at the evaluate.org website, and links to ATE projects and centers and other resources at atecentral.net, which is all on the Mentor Connect website. So please do connect. Please do connect with us. We do have a number of ways we can stay in touch with you through the email, Facebook, Twitter, that type of thing. We get back to you just as soon as we can. We welcome any questions or follow-up that you can have. And we really encourage you to visit that website. The website has a lot of information on it, a lot of things that you can find that will help you throughout your proposal writing process. This webinar and the PowerPoint slides will be available following this broadcast, and they are archived on the Mentor Connect website, and also that tutorial, which is just wonderful to go back and forth between the tutorial and the PowerPoint and some of the things that you need to do to review one of these multiple forms. So we just thank you for your participation, and the mentioned link that was dead within the PowerPoint, we will have that fixed and up to date, and that will be in the tutorial and a link sent to you after today. So we thank you for your participation, and we really look forward to hearing from you and supporting your efforts in any way that you need, and continue towards your submission of your NSF ATE grant proposal. Mike, if you could talk a little bit about the evaluation, that would be great.
Thank you, Emery. First, colleagues, before I put up today's closing survey, let us all join a round of applause for Ellen and Elaine and Emery. And I'll echo what several people have mentioned in the chat. Just a great amount of information. We're exhausted listening to all of these forms, but we know we've got to do it, and we really appreciate the help here. So thank you all. So this officially ends our webinar for today, but what's going to happen is something that's very important to us. As I click this next link, I'm going to launch today's survey. There's just a couple of questions, but it helps us improve this webinar. This will open another browser window on your system. So look for it in another browser window, and please click on those radio buttons and then hit submit. Now, I should caution you that not all systems will display this survey. You may have to look for it. I'm going to paste it into the chat window. Sometimes a Mac will not feel like displaying the survey. You might have to click on the link yourself. But we do appreciate, your help with that. So here comes the link in the survey, in the chat window. So friends, that officially concludes our webinar today. Please, again, respond to the chat. I'm going to turn off the recording now. Mentor Connect Forever, thank you for joining today's event. Goodbye.